Let me tell you about my Murder, She Wrote notes. So I started watching Murder, She Wrote because it was a good premise, and I liked the character, and around season 5 I thought to myself, just how many times has Jessica Fletcher seen a dead body? And while the fans of the show did note some things and put them online, how many nieces and nephews she has, how many books she wrote, etc., they didn't take note of this particular macabre fact. So I started over and started writing things down. If she saw a dead body that episode, which authority figure she had to work with, if she did anything zany or crazy, if her life was in danger, and so forth. All in all, I got about 300 pages of notes, and I didn't really have a use for this extensive knowledge until now. So for the sake of getting to talk about Jessica Fletcher some more, let's talk about all the times she's been kidnapped. There are conveniently 10 episodes where she is kidnapped, so we're going to rank them based on how dramatic and exciting it is. For this list, I'm including every time she is either prevented from leaving or taken to a separate location by force. This does not include every time a murderer she confronts holds a gun on her or whatever, because this happens way too often and is usually resolved like right away. It also doesn't include when she gets arrested, which happens 4 times, because it's different when the cops do it, according to our society. I also don't include the time she is trapped in a location because of a storm, or a bus breaks down, or she's on an island, or at a dig site, or wanders into a dungeon and gets locked in, and instead of knocking on the secret panel she came in through, she just hangs around there all night, being scared of rats and only rescued by breaking a high-up window. Frankly, she looks for trouble so often that it's surprising she did not get kidnapped more often than she did. Like, I really want to talk about the time she actively provokes the KGB and gets her passport taken away, but she's allowed to just walk out of his office and go home, so not technically a kidnapping. She is so lucky she's not in the gulag though. Number 10. The first episode of Season 2 is a classic, both because it's the first appearance of the smarmiest intelligent agent in the world, Michael Hagerty, and the first time we see one of Jessica's characters. Every occasionally she will need to make up a person to be to try and get some information. My favorite of these is Emmeline Polsby, a grocer who hitched a ride to the circus to return some change to a guy, but really as Jessica trying to find her brother-in-law, who hated his wife so much he faked his death and became a circus clown. Just the costuming, the details, the decision to pick up a chimpanzee that is just wandering the field, carrying it about 10 feet, then immediately putting it down. Just, mwah, perfect. Second best is Floozy Jessica. They give us no explanation for this in the episode, so I provide no context. Here she is playing Mrs. Margaret Canfield, a reclusive rich widow, to investigate the death of one of her dear friends. Nobody asked her to do this, she was specifically told to not interfere, but she couldn't help herself, and she couldn't go as Jessica's because it would be dangerous. So instead she pretends to be this other lady, specifically draw attention to herself. Yep, far less dangerous, Jess. Also, she still has to use her own passport, so the staff knows who she is immediately. Hagerty slithers up to her on casino night and does this weird chauvinist nonsense, and drives her out to nowhere to tell her to drop the act and explain why she's here. They talk, and he decides that this is fine and takes her back. Not a major threat, but this guy still sucks. He'll be back, don't worry. I don't want to talk about this guy again. If you need to know, some old creep once switched her plane tickets so he could show her his ranch and propose to her. I do not like him. I talked about him in my other Murder, She Wrote video, go watch if you want. Okay, this one isn't technically a kidnapping, but Seth Hazlitt thinks it is, and I find this situation funny enough to mention. Sheriff Metzger is on the trail of an illegal casino in town, but he's having a hard time getting proof. Well, Jessica is more than willing to snoop for free, and just sneaks in the casino by following a group down the hall and knocking. She is discovered immediately by the casino owner, who informs her that she didn't need to sneak in, he would have invited her. He invites her to his private office and they have a very long and veiled conversation in which she accuses him of murder and he threatens her with his connections. Seth has decided she's probably gotten herself in trouble again and calls the casino owner demanding her release in 1 minute or he will tell the police to raid now. It is a wild gambit, but I think unnecessary, as Jessica had control of the situation the entire time. She didn't even need to do this. The reason for the murder isn't even related to the casino. The deputy was actually murdered by some dork's mom who wanted her son to date the deputy's girlfriend. Whoo boy, talk about mommy issues. Real TV thriller vibes on this one. What was going on in the early 90s? Also, Wings Hauser is in this episode as Jessica's accountant who lost all her money gambling. He got a talking to, I tell you what. Hopefully being arrested for murder wisens his ass up. Jessica got an invitation to a huge party in DC from an East German violinist who admires her and has an escort from her publishing company to accompany her. She's at lunch when she runs into Michael Hagerty again, pretending to be a journalist, and he parades into her room and demands her attention for the next several days. She's trying to wriggle out of it because that sounds insufferable and you would probably want to bang, and she's not into that. He says it's a date anyway, and then later pulls a gun on her and demands she and Mr. Mustache get in the car. He tells the driver to find a place to drop them off, but they are being tailed by the Volkspolizei, so he makes a call to the British embassy to open the gate. They pull up and everyone is escorted inside, including 2 people in the trunk, the violinist and her brother. John Glover here is a spy for the British and was about to be compromised, so Hagerty had to pull him in for asylum, and I guess also Jessica for some reason. No idea why she was kidnapped, it was not a heat of the moment thing, he approached them in the lobby. Anyway, they are hanging out at the embassy and the driver is discovered dead. It becomes a whole thing, lots of secrets around, Rhodesia is invoked, and ultimately it turns out Sir Topham Hatt is a secret assassin who had taken advantage of Jessica's invitation to murder the Prime Minister. He killed the driver to keep from being compromised, but of course Jess figured it out, she figures out everything. So Jessica prevented an assassination attempt, all because Hagerty is an ass who was so down bad and wouldn't take no for an answer. I still do not like this man. Oh no, it's a horse racing episode. I hate horse racing mystery episode. It's always the same twist every time. It's a different horse. They should always immediately check the horse. Her niece Tracy is a jockey and wins her first race, but probably because of sexism, there are hints and allegations, and also a horse owner turns up dead. Jessica is doing a thing where she snoops around, and this gets the attention of a local crime boss who has a couple of guys capture her to watch him be a full lobster. Turns out the race was fixed and Tracy wasn't supposed to win. They let her go with the warning, and after she starts visiting a bunch of stables trying to find the different horse, she gets a shotgun held on her by this guy. He sicks the horse on her, but she is saved by the cops who arrest him, but he didn't do it. It was actually Vicky, the wife of another jockey. She was protecting her husband from being deported. I feel kind of bad for Vicky. It's time for the Founders Day picnic in Cabot Cove, when someone comes running out of the hills followed by a driverless car. He escapes, but it's the buzz of the town, especially when a run-down body is found on the outskirts of town. Well, Jessica is on the lookout, and when she sees the station wagon tucked away in the woods, she climbs inside to look around. Of course, the car is controlled by a remote control device, and of course the person with the controls is watching from a nearby van and starts the car, taking Mrs. Fletcher on a wild ride. It's all a bit silly, especially how it is 1984 and the power of remote control electronics were rudimentary at best, so the driver needs to stay within 100 yards, making the whole race kind of ridiculous. The kidnapper drives her about 10 miles from the hill, through town, and down the coast. She finally gets the attention of Not Seth, who also joins the chase, and the remote control car is driven through a closed road and towards a cliff. Oh no! But right before it goes over, the kidnapper just stops the car and runs away. Not terribly sure what the plan was here. I guess to scare Jess, but she seems more annoyed by the whole situation. She had to be trapped in that car for like 30 minutes. Hard to maintain terror for that long. This whole ordeal leads to the arrest of Jessica's inventor friend, who is pretty sure he didn't do it, but maybe he's a Jekyll and Hyde. And it takes another remote control car attack to expose the real culprit, someone's fiance, who was working with the inventor's partner to steal the patents. It's a good thing Jessica played spy hunter, otherwise she never would have figured this out. Just so you know, Jessica Fletcher has seen 170 dead bodies in the main series. She sees 3 additional bodies in the TV movies, and however many more in the 60 or so spin-off novels. This lady has seen a lot of death in her life, and most of the time is treated with the proper gravity such an event demands. Sometimes though, Jessica finds the same corpse 3 times. Jessica is in London hanging out with a friend, she just so happened to be in the area, and as she goes to her hotel room, a woman screams and runs away, and Jessica finds a stabbed man. She goes to get the authorities, only to come back to an empty room. The inspector tells her to forget about it, But this is Jessica Fletcher. She cannot just forget about it, and starts lying like crazy and chasing strange men, coming across the dead body again in the garbage. She calls the police and the body has disappeared again. The inspectors had enough of her, even after she shows him solid evidence, when there's a commotion outside. A body has fallen from the 7-story window, and surprise, it's the same body again. Jessica waits around the police station to figure out what's happening, only to be told that she's crazy, the wallet she found belongs to another guy, and that body is just some tradesman. Jessica continues to poke around, and even after a loan shark corners her in a room, she keeps pushing and gets into a car with a strange man who refuses to tell her where they are going. He takes her to an estate in the country so she can get the full info. The dead man is a double agent in MI5. It's more spy bullshit. There's more intrigue, and Jessica finally realizes that the dead man had a cat. Surprise, it was once again some woman who murdered the guy for a completely unrelated reason. Not sure why this keeps happening. Jessica and Seth are going to dinner at a fancy lobster restaurant in Boston, with this maitre d' that I recognize from his role in the Sega CD game Suitors.
Hey, dog food, or whatever your name is. This is Commissioner Stenchler. Listen, pal, you're a disgrace to the exterminating profession. If I didn't have this pressing dinner engagement, I'd come right down there and I'd...
He'd deck you!
Yeah, I'd deck you.
And even though it isn't what they expect, they stay anyway. This is a mistake, as it is now a mob restaurant, and they have a 2-star experience when there's a shooting in the alley, and Seth is, unfortunately, a doctor. Sewer shark guy fetches him and he disappears, leaving Jessica to try and find him. There's no real clues in the restaurant, some blood, and Seth is eventually found by the side of the road. He had been kidnapped to patch up the mafia don, and he does what he can and gets dropped off on a random side street. He goes back to the police station and explains what happens, and the cops insist they don't leave town, just in case they need to go into witness protection and move to Provo, Utah. A fate worse than death. They're still poking around the next day when a goon kidnaps both of them and brings them to the mob mansion. The Don's condition has gone south, and they need a doctor again to come and look at the corpse. Things are tense, and people are ready to blame Seth and murder him, but Jessica gets a look at the drama and figures out it was the wife who hired the hit, because she didn't want to move away from her family and miss the birth of her grandchild. Again? It was once again a woman unrelated to the criminal activity? I've got like 4 nickels so far. That's too many nickels. Jessica's in New York, researching a journalist, when she is suddenly grabbed off the street and taken to a shitty garage. She gets out of the car demanding an explanation, and everyone realizes, oh no, they grabbed the wrong lady. She tells the famous millionaire, Max Hagen, that she doesn't believe his story and will be going to the cops, and he is kinda screwed because they can't just murder her, she's a famous novelist. She goes to Lieutenant Artie Gerber, who is finally retiring in 11 days, to complain that she was kidnapped by this millionaire and he should do something about it. He doesn't want to, and Hagen just lies about the whole thing. Artie drops her off, and she is again forced into a nearby car by a couple of thugs. This time it's the feds, who are trying to pin down Max Hagen and need information. She realizes why she was kidnapped. She was given the wrong sleeve at the travel agency, and she figured out that the person they were trying to grab was Liz Foster, who has been found dead. Liz was trying to whistleblow on the millionaire, and it didn't end well for her. Jess does some investigating, lies to some feds, and discovers that the murderer was the mole in the organization, who decided to take the money and run. The millionaire goes down, Jessica's journalist friend gets a good scoop and brings her ice cream, and I guess Artie Gerber decides not to retire because he appears or is mentioned in 9 more episodes. He's her main police contact in New York. He almost wins the lottery once. The show kinda goes out of its way to keep Jessica out of hostage situations. Whenever one is on screen, Jessica is usually noticeably absent, like during the climax of the season 5 finale, where Sheriff Metzger talks down a volatile man while Jess is gardening, I assume. Seth told her her garden looks like shit and is eating at her as she waits for him to recover. Stupid rival mystery writer 2-parter, such a wasted premise. When she does get involved in hostage situation, she's pretty volatile, like when she solved the JFK assassination and her actions really put everyone at risk. It is no wonder she was politely told she wasn't allowed to bring the hostage sandwiches in another situation. So she rarely gets to negotiate for other people's lives. But when it's her own, Oh, she is absolutely unstoppable. Her first solve involved convincing her date to turn himself in while they were alone in an isolated location, and she's been talking people out of killing her ever since. She's not perfect, frequently she gets a save, but there's something about being put in immediate danger that causes Jessica to limit break and go full grandma mode. Like the time she accidentally got caught in a prison riot. Yes, that's right, Jessica has survived a prison riot. She was there to substitute for a creative writing class at an all-women's prison that was having some internal issues with a new warden. Suddenly the alarms go off and the doctor is found dead, and everyone's favorite inmate is discovered in the room. This causes a riot in the cell block, and the prisoners take control, demanding that the accused get a fair shake and conditions approve. Jessica is elected the arbiter because she's a neutral party and she has a reputation for solving crimes, and starts poking around and finding out the conditions here are terrible. The soup tastes awful. They discover the grocer hiding in the closet, and then she is suddenly murdered when the power goes out. Somehow, Jessica is able to keep this powder keg under control, but the governor has had enough and will be sending the National Guard in, while the more aggressive prisoners believe the time for talking is past and want a prison break with Jessica as a human shield. It is only with her standard clear-headedness that she is able to convince the prisoners that she figured it all out. She has a couple of prisoners go down and collect fingerprints from the doctor's corpse, and it turns out they don't match her fingerprints on file. She realizes the doctor was a fraud and had killed herself and left a note that was missing in the chaos. But where was the note now? And who killed the grocer? It was the deputy warden, who had been skimming from the prison budget for decades. She took the note to keep things chaotic and stabbed the grocer in case she was going to talk. She even had an accomplice in one of the prisoners who was planning the prison break. Mind, there are still prisoners with shotguns standing around, and when the deputy warden reveals her deception, one of them aims to fire and Jessica lurches in front of the shot to stop her. Absolutely fearless. There's a struggle and the gun does fire, but into the ceiling, and with the murder solved, the riot is over, and the new warden promises that she's going to set things straight. This episode is so strong, and every single role is played by a woman. The warden, all the guards, even the lieutenant governor. The only men we see is the National Guard, who are standing around and loading boxes at the end. I guess they were trying to be helpful. This episode is a classic, and I'm surprised this is season 2. It's such a broad change from a usual business, and she still fits in the situation perfectly. I only hope if I'm in a prison riot situation, I handle myself so well. So there are some things that have happened to Jessica Fletcher. Boy, she sure does get into a lot of trouble. I don't have an overarching conclusion, except maybe if there's a high-profile murder, check out if there's a woman who might be mad about something kind of petty and decide to kill about it. Happens a lot in these procedural mystery shows. It happens almost as frequently as Rick Simon making an ass out of himself. Who is that, I hear you asking? Why, he is one of the protagonists of Simon & Simon, and this guy is particularly unhinged. Find out what kind of trouble this hunk gets into next time. Goodbye.